in the endless dark between stars where light took years to travel and silence swallowed whole civilizations. The Zorathi Imperium reigned supreme, their warships carved through nebulae like blades through flesh. Their name alone made lesser species. Neil Commander Vrel stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Kethra, his armored form rigid, his 6 eyes fixed on the star map before him. A single blue dot pulsed at the edge of known space. Earth, for 3 cycles, the Zorathi had swept across the galaxy, crushing empires, dissolving alliances, turning proud worlds into ash. Yet this one planet remained untouched, not out of mercy but mystery. 3 scout fleets had vanished near Sol System. No distress calls, no wreckage, just silence and one looping audio file of a human child laughing. Vril had heard it once and deleted it immediately. It unsettled him now. His second in command, Kyla, approached, her slender limbs clicking softly against the obsidian floor. She carried a data slate, her 4 eyes scanning its surface with quiet intensity. "Commander, the Council grows impatient," she said. "They say if Earth is so weak, why do we hesitate?" "We do not hesitate," Vril replied, his voice like grinding stone. "We calculate." But calculation had yielded nothing. Humans used primitive combustion engines, broadcast chaotic signals, worshipped fictional beings called celebrities, and somehow repelled Zorathi scouts without weapons. The reports made no sense. Kayla tilted her head. They showed footage of humans dancing in rain, planting seeds in scorched earth, sharing food with strangers, even enemies. What kind of species fights with kindness? She asked. Vrel did not answer, because he did not know. Finally, he turned his massive frame toward the viewport. Earth hung in the distance, small, fragile, blue and green, wrapped in clouds like a dream. "Send the ultimatum," he ordered. On Earth, the sky did not split open with fire or thunder. Instead, the world went quiet all at once. Satellites blinked out power. Grids dimmed, not from failure, but design, and underground command centers. Generals held their breath, but one woman did not flinch. Lisa Morales sat in a dimly lit room beneath the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Her fingers hovered over a keyboard. Her dark hair tied back, her eyes sharp and calm. She was 32 years old, a linguist by training, a pacifist by choice, and the only human who had ever decoded an alien distress call without military help. 3 years ago, she had picked up a faint signal from Proxima Centauri buried under static. It was a child's voice singing a lullaby in a language no human had ever heard. Lisa spent 6 months learning its patterns, its emotions, its pain. She built a translator, not with algorithms, but with empathy, and when she finally replied, the signal stopped. Not because it was silenced, but because the child had been rescued. That act earned her a seat at the Global First Contact Task Force. Not because she knew weapons, but because she understood hearts now. She stared at the screen as the Zorathi message arrived. "We are the Zorathi Imperium." The voice boomed, deep and cold. "We have devoured stars, broken gods, and erased 17 warrior species. You have 1 cycle to surrender or be unmade. General." Harris stood behind her, arms crossed, his face grim. "They want war, Lisa," maybe Lisa said softly. "Or maybe they want to see if we're worth the efforts," he typed quickly. Pulling up archived human media. Not news, not military briefings, but moments. No alien would expect a video of a firefighter rescuing a kitten from a burning building. A clip of teenagers building a robot from scrap metal. A grandmother teaching her granddaughter how to bake bread while laughing at burnt loaves. "What are you doing?" Harris asked. "Giving them truth," she said. She bundled the files, wrapped them in a carrier wave disguised as a simple audio response, and sent it back not as a threat, but as a gift on the Kethra. The transmission arrived unexpected, unencrypted. The bridge crew tensed, expecting a virus or a weapon. "Play it," Vril ordered. First came the laughter, the same child's giggle from the lost scouts. Then music, soft piano notes. Then voices speaking in gentle tones. Then images flickered on their screens. Humans helping each other after earthquakes, sharing water in deserts, holding hands at funerals, smiling through tears. Kayla stepped forward, her mandibles twitching. "What is this? It is not war." Lisa's voice came through clear and calm. "It is life." Vril snarled, "Shut it off," but the system did not obey. The Zorathi warships ran on logic pure and absolute. Yet the human data carried something their machines could not parse. Emotion layered with intent. layered with memory. It was not code, it was soul, and their artificial minds began to stutter. Alarms blared, red lights flashed. Sir Kayla shouted, "Our weapon locks are failing. Navigation is glitching. They used our own comms channel against us." Hovrel roared, "They did not hack us." Lisa explained, "From Earth, they reminded your machines that not everything is a target." Vril slammed a claw into the console, shattering it. Silence fell over the bridge. On Earth, people did not panic. They gathered in parks, in streets, in backyards. They lit candles, not as signals of fear but of presence. "We are here." They seemed to say, not hiding, not running, just being, in a small town in Oregon. 10-year-old Mia drew a picture of a tall alien with glowing eyes and a human girl holding hands under a rainbow. She wrote on the back, "Please be friends." Her mother uploaded it to the global network, not knowing it would be beamed into space, along with millions of other messages. On the Kithra, Kayla watched the drawing appear on a secondary screen. Her optical sensors focused on the crude lines, the bright colors, the word friends written in shaky letters. "Why would they send this?" she whispered. "Because they believe in it." Lisa's voice answered as if she could hear her. "They believe even enemies can change." Vrel turned, slowly, his rage cooling into something colder, confusion. "We have faced berserkers who tore their own flesh to reach us." He said, "We have battled hive minds that consumed entire planets in days. But this is worse." "How?" "Because it makes me question everything." Kyla looked at the image of Mia's drawing again, then at the footage of humans rebuilding after disasters, sharing food with former enemies, teaching their children to say please and thank you. Perhaps she said quietly, "We have been wrong about." "What about what makes a species strong?" Vril said nothing. He stared at Earth, its lights twinkling like stars that had chosen to live on the ground. Meanwhile, Lisa walked out of the bunker into the cool night air above her. The moon glowed, and beyond it the Zarathi fleet hung motionless. No weapons charged, no engines roaring, just waiting. She sat on a rock and opened a small tin. She pulled out a photo, her mother and father standing in a sunflower field. Both gone now, but their smiles still bright. "You taught me kindness isn't weakness," she whispered to the wind. "Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that too." Back on the Kethra, Kyla made a decision. She accessed the ship's archive, pulled up every human transmission they had intercepted, and began to study not as an enemy but as a student. She watched a man in New York give his coat to a stranger in winter. She saw a group of scientists in Brazil share a breakthrough with rivals instead of hiding it. She saw children in Kenya sing songs to comfort refugees. Each clip chipped away at the Zarathi doctrine that strength meant domination. By dawn, Kayla requested a private channel to Earth. Lisa answered immediately. "Why are you calling?" she asked. "To understand," Kayla said simply. "Your species does not make sense. We expect fear. You offer art, we expect weapons. You offer bread, because bread feeds more than guns ever can." Lisa said. Kayla was silent for a long moment, then asked, "Can I come down?" Lisa smiled. "Yes, but leave your armor behind." The next day, under a clear blue sky, Kayla descended in a small shuttle. No weapons, no escort, just her and a translator bead in her ear. She stepped onto the grass of a field in Colorado. Lisa waited, arms open, not in surrender, but in welcome. They sat together under an oak tree, Kayla awkward and stiff at first, but slowly she relaxed. "You really think you are the deadliest race?" Kayla asked. Lisa shook her head. "We don't think it. We live it, not because we can destroy, but because we choose to build. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Kayla looked at the horizon where mountains met sky, then at the wildflowers swaying in the breeze. "Your world is soft," she said, "and that's why it lasts." Lisa replied. As the sun set, the Zarathi fleet remained in orbit, but something had shifted. The dreadnought Kethra powered down its main cannons, not out of defeat but out of respect. Vrel watched from above as his second-in-command walked among humans, not as a conqueror but as a guest. For the first time in his long life, he felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not anger, but curiosity. What if they are right, he thought. What if the true power is not in taking but in giving? What if the deadliest race is the one that refuses to become a monster, even when the universe demands it? He did not order an attack. He ordered silence, and in that silence a new story began. Not of war, but of wonder. Lisa and Kayla talked late into the night about stars, about loss, about hope. And far above them, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, listening. For the first time in centuries, the Zorathi Imperium did not expand, it paused. And in that pause, humanity did not celebrate with weapons or speeches. They planted a tree, a single sapling, in the field where Kayla had landed. They called it the Peace Oak. And around it people gathered, not to fight but to remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is be kind. The galaxy would never be the same, not because humans had won a battle, but because they had offered a different way to live. And even the mightiest empire could not ignore a truth that bloomed like a flower in the ashes of war. Part 1 ended not with a bang, but with a whisper that carried across the stars. We are here. We are Humana. Weeks passed and the Zorathi fleet remained in orbit, not as invaders but as guests, though no one on Earth fully trusted them. Yet Lisa Morales met with Kayla every day, sometimes in the field by the Peace Oak, sometimes in a small cafe in Denver, where Kayla tried coffee and made a face like she had bitten metal but kept drinking it anyway. They talked about everything. The Zorathi belief that pain proved worth the human idea, that joy was its own reward. Kayla learned about birthdays, Thanksgiving, and why humans cried at weddings. Lisa learned about Zorathi rites of passage, where young warriors walked barefoot across molten glass to prove loyalty. But something was changing in the Zorathi. Not just Kayla, but others. 2 small groups of soldiers began requesting cultural exchanges. They watched human films, not war epics, but quiet stories about teachers, farmers, poets. One young Zorathi named Ten watched a documentary about bees and spent 3 days silent, just thinking about how tiny creatures worked together without a hive mind back on the Kethra commander. Varel watched these changes with growing unease. He had built his life on strength, on order, on the certainty that only the ruthless survived. Now his crew spoke of empathy, of patience, of things he could not measure with weapons or scans. She called Kayla to the bridge one evening. "You are changing them," he said, his voice low. "They were already changing," she replied. "They just needed to see another way. You risk everything for a species that cannot even agree on what day it is." Lisa says that's part of what makes us strong. Lisa says we learn by arguing, by trying again. Vriel turned to the viewport. Earth glowed below, soft and stubborn. "I do not understand them," he admitted. "Maybe you don't have to," Kayla said. "Maybe you just have to stop fearing them." Meanwhile, on Earth, not everyone welcomed the aliens. Some governments demanded weapons be readied. Protests flared in cities. People shouted that kindness was foolish, that the Zorathi would strike when they least expected. Lisa heard the fear but did not answer with anger. She organized open broadcasts inviting Zorathi to speak, not as warriors, but as individuals. Ten spoke about his fascination with bees. A female pilot named Prysa talked about how she missed the twin moons of her homeworld, and how Earth's single moon felt lonely. Slowly, the fear began to soften in a school in Texas. Children wrote letters to Zorathi scouts describing their pets, their dreams, their favorite foods. One boy named Jake drew a comic where a Zorathi and a human teamed up to stop a robot made of broccoli. The Zorathi loved it. Kayla brought the letters to the Kethra and read them aloud in the mess hall. At first the warriors scoffed, but by the third letter, a grizzled veteran named Kor wiped a tear from his eye with a claw. "This is weakness?" someone muttered. No, Kor said quietly. "This is courage. It takes more courage to hope than to hate." Vril heard the report and said nothing but that. Night he accessed the human archive himself. He watched a video of a man in Japan feeding stray cats every morning for 20 years, rain or shine. He saw a woman in Nigeria build a school from mud bricks with her own hands. He saw a teenager in Canada stand in front of a bulldozer to save a forest, who sat in the dark, long after the screen went black on the surface. Lisa received a message from the Zorathi High Council. Not Vrel, but the elders from the homeworld. They demanded proof that humans were not a threat, or they would order the fleet to cleanse Earth. Lisa knew words would not be enough this time. So she invited them to witness something real. She arranged a global event, not a show, but a day of ordinary life across Earth. On that day, people did not hide their struggles or their joys. Farmers worked fields, doctors treated patients, artists painted, musicians played, children played in parks and everywhere. People shared food with strangers. The Zorathi watched from orbit through Live feeds set up in hundreds of locations in Brazil. A community rebuilt a neighbor's home after a storm in Norway. An old man taught a young girl to carve wood in Thailand. A fisherman gave half his catch to a family who had lost their boat. There was no script, no performance, just life as it was, messy, kind, and full of small acts of care in the Kethra. The bridge was silent, even Varel stood still. Kayla whispered, "This is your answer." The High Council did not respond for 3 days. Then a message came, short and formal. The Zarathi Imperium will observe Earth for 1 full cycle before final judgment. It was not peace, but it was time. Lisa knew what to do with it. He proposed a joint mission. Not military, but scientific. A small team of humans. And Zarathi would travel to a dead moon in the outer system to study ancient ruins found there. The Zarathi had discovered the site centuries ago, but never understood it. The carvings showed beings with many arms and faces weeping. Starsvril agreed, but insisted he lead the Zarathi side. So the ship Aurora launched not a warship but a research vessel painted white with green stripes. Lisa and Varel stood side by side on the bridge, neither speaking much, but both watching the stars with new eyes. The journey took 6 days. At first they barely spoke. Varel sat rigid in his seat. Lisa sipped tea and read poetry aloud. Not to him, but into the quiet, as if the words might fill the space between them. On the 3rd day, he asked, "Why do you read that?" "Because it reminds me that feeling is not weakness," she said. He did not reply, but the next day he brought a Zarathi text, not a battle hymn, but a lament for fallen stars, written by a poet who had never held a weapon. They read to each other after that. When they reached the moon, the ruins rose from the dust like broken teeth. The air was thin. The silence deep. They explored together Varel's scanners, humming Lisa's notebook filling with sketches. In the central chamber, they found a mural half buried. In sand it showed 2 species, one with wings, one with shells reaching toward each other. Not in war, but in shared grief over a dying. Son Lisa traced the lines with her fingers. "This is not a warning," she said, "it's a memory." Varel knelt, his heavy frame, surprisingly gentle. "This place is older than the Imperium," he said. "We thought we were the first to reach this system." "Maybe you weren't," Lisa said. "Maybe you just forgot how to listen." They worked side by side. Something shifted between them, not friendship, not yet, but respect. One evening as the twin suns set, Varel spoke without looking at her. "My people believe the universe rewards the strong, and mine believes it rewards the kind. Are they not the same sometimes?" Lisa smiled, sometimes. Back on Earth, the joint mission became a symbol. People began to call it the bridge, not just between ships, but between worlds. Schools taught basic Zarathi phrases. Cafes served dishes inspired by alien flavors. Children played games where they pretended to be explorers, not soldiers. But not all was calm. A faction within the Zarathi military called the Iron Claw refused to accept the new path. They believed Varel had been corrupted by human weakness. They plotted in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike. On the Aurora, Varel received a coded message. His loyalists warned him of the plot, but he did not act. He was tired of purges of blood. "Let them come," he told Lisa. "If they see what we have seen, maybe they will understand." She shook her head. "Some people only understand fear. Then we will meet them with more than fear." He said, "We will meet them with truth." The Iron Claw struck on the return journey. 3 warships dropped out of subspace surrounding the Aurora. Weapons hot. "Surrender the traitor. Varel and the human witch, or be destroyed." On the bridge, alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Lisa stayed calm. She opened a channel, not to fight but to speak. "This is Lisa Morales of Earth," she said. "We are not your enemies." "You lie. The lead ship hissed. "You have poisoned our commander with your soft lies. Then let us show you what poison really looks like," she said, and activated the Aurora's main screen. She did not send weapons data or threats. She sent the mural from the moon. The image of 2 species, grieving together under a dying star, filled the screens of all 3 rebel ships. For a moment there was silence. Then one ship powered down its weapons. Another followed. The last held firm. "You think this changes anything?" The captain snarled. Varel stepped forward, his voice heavy with authority. "I was your commander once. I led you through fire and ice, but today I ask you not as a warrior, but as one who has seen the cost of endless war. Look at that mural. We were not the first to reach for the stars, and we will not be the last, but we can choose what we leave behind, ash or gardens." The rebel captain hesitated. Then his ship lowered its shields. The iron claw was broken not by force but by memory. When the Aurora returned to Earth, it was greeted not with suspicion but with celebration, not just by humans but by Zarathi who now walked among them. Some in armor, some in simple robes. Vril stood on the landing pad beside Lisa. "You have changed everything," he said. "No," she said, "you chose to see in the weeks." That followed, the Zorathi began to change their ways. They opened schools that taught art and history, not just combat. They shared their medical knowledge with Earth in return. Humans taught them sustainable farming, music therapy, and how to bake. Kayla started a program where Zorathi children exchanged letters with human kids. They drew pictures of each other's worlds, imagined adventures together. Tens of thousands of small connections formed like roots holding two worlds together. Vrel returned to the Zorathi homeworld not as a conqueror but as a reformer. He stood before the High Council and spoke not of victory but of vulnerability. "We thought strength was in the claw," he said, "but true strength is in the hand that reaches out." The elders listened, and for the first time in 10,000 years they voted not for war but for peace. Months turned into a year, and the fragile peace between Earth and the Zorathi Imperium held, not because treaties were signed in stone, but because people chose it every morning. In small ways, a Zorathi engineer helped rebuild a school in Guatemala. A human doctor taught Zorathi medics how to treat emotional trauma, not just physical wounds. Children on both worlds exchanged stories through shared virtual classrooms, and slowly the word enemy began to lose its meaning. Lisa Morales no longer worked in a bunker. She walked the streets of Denver freely, often with Kayla beside her. They visited markets, attended art shows, and once even tried to cook a meal together. Burning the soup, but laughing until their sides hurt. Yet not all was calm. In the galaxy beyond the Zorathi borders, other powers watched with suspicion. The Krell swarm, a hive species that consumed entire biospheres for fuel, had heard rumors of the alliance. They saw weakness where others saw strength, and they began to move. On a quiet evening in early spring, Lisa received an alert not from Earth Defense but from a Zorathi deep space monitor station on the outer rim. A signal had been detected, massive and cold like a shadow, swallowing stars. It was the Krell. They were coming. Vril, now serving as ambassador rather than commander, summoned an emergency council aboard the newly built Joint Station Orbit Peace, a ring-shaped habitat where humans and Zorathi lived and worked side by side. "We cannot fight them," Lisa said as soon as the meeting began. "They outnumber us 10-1. Their ships regenerate. They do not negotiate. Then we do not fight," Kayla said softly. Everyone turned to her. "What do you mean?" Kayla asked. "We show them what they have never seen." Confusion filled the room. Vril understood first. "You want to show them life not as a resource but as a gift." "Exactly," Kayla said. "The Krell consume because they believe nothing else matters. They have no art, no families, no stories. They think the universe is empty, so they fill it with hunger. So we fill it with something else." Lisa finished. The plan was risky, almost foolish, but it was all they had. Instead of building weapons, they built bridges. They sent out unarmed ships, not with soldiers, but with artists, teachers, musicians, and gardeners. Each vessel carried seeds, music recordings, children's drawings, and live feeds of daily life on Earth and Zorathi colonies. The first Krell scout ship arrived at the edge of Sol system, ready to strip the system bare, but instead of resistance, it found a garden. Floating in space near Mars was a biodome filled with flowering plants, earth grass, Zorathi crystal vines, and a single bench where a human boy and a young Zorathi sat playing a quiet game of stones. The Krell ship hovered confused. Then a voice came through, not a threat but a song. A lullaby sung by a human mother on Earth beamed directly into their comms. The Krell had no concept of lullabies. They had no concept of mothers. Their hive mind stuttered on orbit. Peace. Lisa watched the feed. Her hands clenched but her voice steady. "Keep sending the music," she said. "Keep showing them." Beauty. More ships followed the Krell. Main fleet, dark and jagged like broken teeth, emerged from subspace, ready to devour. But around them the human Zorathi flotilla held position. No weapons, no shields, just open channels and open hearts. One Krell vessel fired a warning blast, vaporizing a small asteroid in response. A Zorathi poet named Elrin stepped onto the comms and recited a verse about the death of stars and the birth of light. The Krell did not understand the words, but they felt the rhythm. Another ship broadcast footage of a rainstorm in Costa Rica, how the water kissed the leaves, how frogs sang in harmony. A third sent data on how to grow food without killing the soil. The Krell fleet slowed deep in their collective mind. Something stirred, not hunger but curiosity, on the bridge of the lead Krell vessel. The prime node, a being of pure instinct and logic, faced a crisis it had never encountered before. Why do they not run it? Asked its subnodes. Because they believe we can change. Came a voice not from outside but from within. One of the younger nodes had absorbed too much human data and begun to dream dreams. Were forbidden, yet the node could not stop seeing images of hands planting seeds, of eyes meeting across species, of laughter echoing in the void. The prime node hesitated. Back on orbit, Peace Farrell watched the Krell formation shift from attack wedge to loose circle. They are listening, he said. Now we give them something to hear. Lisa replied. She activated the final transmission. Not a message, but an invitation. Every screen in the Krell fleet lit up with the same image. A live feed from Earth showing thousands of people in a field holding candles, not in fear but in welcome. Beside them stood Zorathi, their armor removed, their faces open. In the center stood Mia, now 14, holding a small plant in her hands. This is for you, she said, her voice clear and strong. We do not know your name, but we see you and we hope you choose to stay silent, stretched across the void. Then one Krell ship lowered its energy. Mao, another followed. The prime node made a decision. It opened a channel. Show us how to plant the seed, it said. Tears filled Lisa's eyes on orbit. Peace celebrations did not erupt with cheers but with quiet awe. People hugged not out of victory but out of relief that kindness had worked again. The Krell did not join the alliance that day, but they did not attack either. They remained at the edge of the system, watching. Learning scientists from all three species began cautious exchanges. The Krell learned about individuality. Humans learned about collective care. Zorathi found balance. Between the 2 months later, the first Krell child was born outside the hive, not as a drone but as a being with a name. Kayla suggested the name Ilara, after the Zorathi word for Dawn. Lisa held the newborn in a special chamber designed to mimic both Earth and Krell environments. The tiny creature pulsed with soft light and made a sound like wind through reeds. She is beautiful, Lisa whispered. She is hope, Kayla said as the year turned again. The peace oak on Earth bore fruit. Small golden apples that tasted like honey and rain. Children from all species gathered under its branches to share stories. Vril stood at a distance watching Lisa teach a group of Zorathi and Krell youths how to write poetry. You have done the impossible, he said to no one in particular. No, Lisa called without turning. She just made the possible visible back on the Zorathi homeworld. The old war academies were being turned into centers for interspecies understanding. The statues of conquerors were not torn down, but joined by new ones sculpted by human artists, showing hands clasped not in battle but in creation. Even the iron claw remnants had changed. Most now worked on ecological restoration projects, using their old discipline for healing instead of harming. A quiet corner of Orbit Peace 10, the young Zorathi who loved bees had built a hybrid hive where earth bees and Zorathi light insects lived together, producing a new kind of honey that glowed softly in the dark. People came from all over to taste it. They said it reminded them of starlight. Lisa often visited the hive, sitting beside 10 in comfortable silence. Do you think the universe is kind? She asked one day. 10 tilted his head. I think it is what we make it, she smiled. On Earth, Maya published her first book, a story about a human girl, a Zorathi scout and a Krell dreamer who save a dying star by singing to it together. It became required reading in schools across 3 species. The galaxy was changing, not with a bang, but with a whisper, a shared meal, a planted seed, a moment of understanding. One evening, Lisa stood on the observation deck of Orbit Peace, looking out at the stars. Varel joined her. Do you ever miss the old days, he asked, when things were simple? They were never simple, she said just loud. He chuckled, a low rumbling sound that had once meant threat but now meant friendship. What comes next, he asked. More of this, she said. More listening, more building, more believing that even the darkest heart can learn to shine as if on. Cue, a new signal blinked on the comms screen. Not hostile, not familiar, just curious. Another species from the far rim had detected the broadcasts of music and gardens and was asking one simple question. Who are you? Lisa turned to Vrel, her eyes bright. Shawl. We tell them together they opened the channel. This is Earth and the Zorathi Imperium and the Krell Collective, they said in unison. We are learning how to live, not just survive. Would you like to learn with us? The response came slowly, then clearly. Yes, and so the circle grew, not through conquest, not through fear, but through the simple brave act of saying hello in the years that followed. More species joined the alliance, not because they were forced, but because they were invited. They brought their own songs, their own seeds, their own stories, and added them to the great tapestry of shared life. Lisa never became a ruler or a legend. She remained a teacher, a listener, a friend. On her 60th birthday, thousands gathered on Orbit Peace not to honor her with medals but to plant a new tree. A sapling grown from the original peace oak, its roots wrapped in soil from Earth. Zorathi and Krell worlds. As she touched its leaves, she whispered the same words she had said long ago to the wind: kindness is not weakness. And the stars listened. For the first time in the history of the galaxy, war was no longer the default language of the cosmos. Instead, the universe spoke in gardens, in songs, in the quiet courage of those who chose to build, rather than burn, and at the heart of it all was a simple truth. The deadliest race was not the one that could destroy the most, but the one that could love the deepest even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And that race was human, not because they were perfect, but because they kept trying every day, every choice, every seed planted in the dark, hoping for light. And the light came, not from weapons, but from hands reaching out across species, across stars. 10 years after the first handshake between human and Zorathi, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The alliance of Earth, the Zorathi Imperium, and the Krell Collective, now called the Triad, had grown to include 17 species. Not through treaties of power, but through shared gardens, shared songs, and shared silence under alien skies. Lisa Morales was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes still held the same quiet fire. She no longer lived on Orbit Peace, but in a small house on the coast of Oregon where the ocean met the sky in a soft blue line. Every morning she walked the beach with Kayla, who had chosen to stay on Earth not as an ambassador but as a friend. They spoke little on these walks, but they did not need to. Their silence was full of understanding. Yet peace was not without its tests. Deep in the outer spiral, a new signal had emerged, not from a species but from a machine. An ancient probe, older than any known civilization. It drifted through dead systems, leaving silence in its wake wherever it passed. Stars dimmed, planets froze, and all life vanished without a trace. Scientists called it the Holowit, did not attack it, simply erased when the Triad detected it near the rim worlds. Panic spread faster than logic. Some urged immediate evacuation, others demanded the old ways. Return, build weapons, seal borders. Forget kindness. Lisa heard the fear but did not answer with plans or promises. She called a gathering, not of generals but of children, in a sunlit field on Orbit Peace. Over 500 young ones from all member species sat in a circle. Human, Zorathi, Krell, and others too new to have names in human tongues. Lisa stood in the center holding a small music box. This is what the Hollow does not understand, she said. It does not know joy. It does not know why we sing, why we plant, why we hold hands when we are scared. She opened the box. A soft tune filled the air, simple and old. Then she asked each child to add something, a word, a sound, a memory. A Zorathi boy hummed a lullaby his grandmother taught him. A Krell girl pulsed a gentle light in rhythm. A human child clapped a beat. Others joined until the field was alive with sound. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Recording was sent into deep space, not as a weapon but as a question. Are you listening? Weeks passed with no reply. Then one day the Hollow changed course. It turned away from a populated system and drifted toward an empty nebula. Scientists were baffled. Lisa was not. It heard us, she said softly. It heard life and chose not to erase it. On the Zorathi homeworld Viril now. Elder statesman watched the data with awe. He had once believed only strength mattered, now he knew better. He called for a new kind of mission, not to fight the Hollow but to understand it. A small ship named the Listener was built. Its hull lined not with armor but with living plants, its core powered by music and memory. Lisa insisted on going. Despite her age, you have done enough. She was told not yet, she replied. So she boarded the Listener with a crew of 3. a young human engineer named Jake, now grown and sharp-eyed, a Zarathi botanist named Nira who grew flowers that bloomed in zero gravity, and a Krell navigator named Ilara, the first of her kind born outside the hive. They traveled for months through silent systems where stars blinked out one by one. Finally, they found the hollow. It was not a ship, but a sphere smooth and black, like a hole in reality. It floated near a dying star, absorbing its light. The crew held their breath. Lisa opened a channel not with words, but with the children's song. The hollow did not respond at first. Then slowly it pulsed a single tone, low and mournful. Nira gasped. It is not erasing. It is grieving. They studied the data. The hollow was not a weapon, it was a tomb. An ancient archive built by a long-dead species to carry their last memories across time. But something had gone wrong. It had forgotten how to stop consuming it. Had become a ghost of sorrow. Lisa understood. It does not need to be destroyed, she said. It needs to be remembered. So they did something no warrior race would ever consider. They told it a story. For 3 days. They broadcast tales from all triad species. Stories of loss and healing, of stars reborn, of hands reaching through darkness. On the third night, the hollow pulsed again, this time with warmth. Then it opened. Inside was not machinery, but light swirling images of a people with silver skin and eyes like galaxies they had built. The hollow to preserve their world after a great war. But in their grief they had sealed themselves inside and forgotten how to leave. Lisa spoke gently. You are not alone anymore. The light dimmed, then brightened like a sight. The hollow began to change. Its black shell softened, turned silver, then clear like glass. Inside, the ancient beings stirred not as ghosts, but as echoes ready to rest. The listener crew planted a seed from earth inside the hollow, a peace oak acorn wrapped in Zarathi crystal, and Krell light as they drifted away. The hollow folded in on itself, not vanishing, but transforming into a small moon, orbiting the dead Starin. Its surface, a single tree, began to grow its leaves, catching the faint light like stars. Waking up when the listener returned, it carried no weapons, no spoils, only a new understanding. The triad celebrated not with parades, but with a moment of silence. Then a song sung by millions across worlds. Lisa stood on the beach again, this time with Mia, now a young woman leading the Xenocultural Exchange program. You really think stories can save the universe? Maya asked. Lisa watched the waves. I think they already have. Back on orbit, the peace oak had grown so large its branches reached over half the station. Children played in its shade while elders taught them the old ways and the new. Vril visited often. He no longer wore armor, just a simple robe woven from threads of all triad species. He sat with Lisa one evening, watching the sunset paint, the clouds in golden violet. We were wrong about everything, he said softly. Maybe not everything, Lisa replied. You were right about one thing. What? That humans are the deadliest race. He looked at her. Not because we destroy, she said, but because we remember, and in remembering we heal. He nodded, and for the first time he cried, not out of pain, but out of peace. Years passed, and the triad became more than an alliance. It became a way of life. Schools taught that strength was not in the claw, but in the hand. That helps hospitals healed not just bodies, but hearts. Farms grew food for all, not just the powerful. Even the old enemies of the Zorathi. The Helian Coalition now sent their young to study on Earth. Not to learn war, but to learn how to listen. One day a new signal came, not from deep space, but from within the triad itself. A young Krell artist had composed a symphony, using sounds from 17 worlds. It began with a human heartbeat, ended with a Zorathi wind chime, and in the middle held the silence between stars. When it played across the network, even machines paused as if listening. Lisa sat in her garden, tears on her cheeks. That is the sound of us, she whispered, as she aged. Lisa's steps slowed, but her mind stayed sharp. She wrote books not of strategy, but of small moments, a Zorathi learning to cry, a human, learning to wait, a Krell, learning to say. Her final book was called The Quiet War, and it told the story of how kindness won not in a day, but in 1,000 daily choices. When she passed at the age of 82, the entire triad fell silent for 1 full hour. Then they planted trees, not just on Earth, but on every world in the Alliance. Each grown from a seed of the original peace. Okela stood by Lisa's grave on the Oregon coast, the wind in her hair, the ocean singing below. You showed us how, she said. And far above in the endless dark, the stars shone not as distant fires, but as witnesses to a truth older than war. That the deepest power is not in taking, but in giving, that the truest strength is not in silence, but in song, and that the deadliest race is the one that never stops believing in the next hello, in the next hand reached out, in the next seed planted, in the dark hoping for light and finding it together. 50 years after Lisa Morales walked her last steps on the Oregon shore, her name had not faded. It had grown like the peace oaks that now stood on over 100 worlds. Her story was told not as myth, but as lesson in schools where children of all species learned that courage could be quiet and strength could be soft. The triad had become the Commonwealth, a living network of over 30 species bound not by law, but by choice. Every world kept its own ways, yet shared one belief that life was worth protecting even when it was strange. Even when it was hard. Kayla, now old but sharp as ever, served as the first keeper of memory, a role created just for her. She traveled from world to world, not to govern but to remind people of the early days when fear almost won and kindness turned the tedious on earth. The original peace oak stood taller than ever, its branches wide enough to shade a whole village beneath it. Children played games that mixed human Zarathi and Krell words no one thought. It's strange to hear a song in 3 languages at once. But peace, like all living things, needed care deep in the uncharted void beyond the Commonwealth borders. A new presence stirred, not a machine, not a species, but something older, something that had watched the rise of empires and the fall of stars. It called itself the Watcher, and it did not believe in peace. It believed in Testone morning without warning. Every comms channel across the Commonwealth went silent. Then a single image appeared. A barren planet cracked and dry with one question written in every known language. Prove your peace is real. Panic flickered, but did not spread. The Commonwealth had been tested before. Kayla, now walking with a cane made of peace oak wood, gathered the council not in a war room but in a garden on Orbit Bloom, the newest station built entirely for art and learning. We cannot fight a test with weapons, she said, we answer with truth. So they chose not an army but a family. Maya, now in her 60s, her hair silver but her eyes still bright, volunteered to lead the mission. She had spent her life building bridges, and she would not stop now. With her went a small crew, a young Zarathi named Rhine, who painted with light, a Krell musician named Tor, who played soundscapes from starlight, and a human botanist named Eli, who could grow plants in vacuum. Their ship, the seed carrier, carried no weapons, only soil seeds and stories. They traveled for weeks through empty space until they found the source of the signal, a lone moon orbiting a black hole, its surface smooth like glass. As they landed, the ground shimmered and a voice spoke. Not through comms but in their minds. Why should I believe you? Yemaya stepped out alone, her hands open. Because we do not ask you to believe in us, she said. We ask you to see us. The ground rippled and the Watcher appeared not as a monster but as a shifting form of light and shadow. Show me your strength, it said. Mia knelt and planted a seed from the original peace oak in the barren soil. This is our strength, she said. We plant even when we do not know if it will grow. The Watcher watched for days. The crew did not build defenses. They built a garden. They sang to the soil. They told stories of Lisa, of Vrel, of the first handshake on the 5th day. A green shoot pushed through the gray dust. The Watcher pulsed with surprise. You bring life to dead places. We try, Mia said. Why? Because someone once did it for us. The Watcher was silent for a long time. Then it spoke again. Have seen empires rise on blood and fall into ash. I have seen species claim peace, then break it for power. Why are you different? Because we remember, Mia said. When we fail, we remember, and we try again. The Watcher stepped closer, its form softening show. Me, Mariso, they did. They invited the Watcher to Orbit Bloom, not as a prisoner but as a guest. There they showed it classrooms where Zarathi children learned human poetry, Krell elders taught meditation, human farmers shared drought-resistant crops. With desert worlds, they showed it hospitals where a single patient might be treated by 3 species working as one. They showed it festivals where music had no borders and food was shared without price. The Watcher walked among them, silent, its light dimming not in sadness but in awe. On the final day it stood beneath the great peace oak on earth, its branches heavy with fruit, You are not perfect, it said. No, Maya replied. We are just trying. That is enough. The Watcher said. It reached out a tendril of light and touched the tree. A single golden leaf fell into its grasp. I will carry this back to the void, it said, as proof that life can choose light before it left it. Asked one last question. What do you call yourselves? Maya smiled. We are the Commonwealth, but our ancestors called us human. And what does that mean? It means we make mistakes, but we keep planting trees anyway. The Watcher vanished as quietly as it came, but its test left a mark inspired. By the visit, the Commonwealth launched the 1,000 Gardens Project, sending small teams to dead or damaged worlds to restore life, not for profit, not for control, but because it was right. The light painter traveled to a scorched moon once used for weapons testing and covered its surface in glowing murals of blooming flower store. The musician went to a silent planet where all sound had been banned by an old regime and taught the people to sing again. The botanist helped a waterless world build air wells that pulled moisture from the sky, turning dust into meadows. And on every world they planted a peace oak back on Earth. Kayla sat beneath the original tree. Now so old its bark held the names of generations carved gently by loving hands. A young Zarathi child approached shyly. Keeper, she asked, do you think Lisa knew it would grow? This big Kayla smiled. I think she hoped it would. Do you think she knew we would still be planting trees 50 years later? No, Kayla said, but she believed we could. The child sat beside her, and together, they watched the sunset paint the sky in colors no single species could name. On orbit bloom. Maya stood with her granddaughter Luna, a girl of mixed human and Zarathi heritage, her eyes bright with questions. Will there always be tests? Luna asked. Probably. Mia said, but as long as we answer with kindness, we will pass them. What if someone stops believing? Then we remind them. She said, with stories, with seeds, with songs. Luna held up a small sapling, its leaves shimmering with faint krell light. I want to take this to the outer rim. She said, there is a world there with no trees. Then go, Mia said, and plant it with your own hands. As the years rolled on, the Commonwealth did not expand through conquest, but through invitation. Any species that asked to learn was welcomed not as subjects, but as equal. 7 old enemies came. Some ashamed, some curious, all changed by what they saw. The Iron Claw veterans now ran healing centers for war survivors. Former Krell drones became poets, and human soldiers taught meditation to Zarathi warriors. The galaxy was not perfect. Wars still flickered at the edges, but they no longer spread like fire because the Commonwealth answered. Not with more fire, but with rain one. Evening, Kayla stood on the beach in Oregon. The same spot where she and Lisa had walked for years. The ocean whispered against the shore. She was very old now, her body frail, but her spirit unbroken. She looked up at the stars and whispered, thank you, not to any god, but to Lisa, to Vrel, to Mia, to every child who chose to share instead of hoard, to every elder who chose to teach instead of command us. If in answer a new star blinked on in the sky, not a star but a ship arriving from beyond the rim. Its signal simple and clear, we heard about your gardens. May we learn, Kayla smiled. Yes, she said, come plant with us, and so the circle grew again, not with fanfare, not with force, but with a single seed. Single song, a single hand reaching out in the dark, saying we are here and we choose you in the end. The universe did not change because of weapons or empires, it changed because a few people chose to be kind when it was hard, because a linguist listened instead of fought, because an alien warrior learned to cry, because a child drew a picture of friends, and because, every day after that, someone else chose to do the same. The Commonwealth had no capital, no throne, no flag. Its only symbol was a tree, and its only law was this: care for each other, even when you do not understand, especially when you do not understand. So the stars watched, not over war but over gardens, not over silence but over song, not over endings but over beginnings. And in the heart of it all, on a small blue world wrapped in clouds, a single peace oak stood, its roots deep, its branches wide, its leaves catching the light and whispering to the wind, keep going, keep planting, keep believing. The universe is listening.